Welcome to the Casual Author Podcast. I'm Dan, sci-fi and fantasy author. Like you, I've got a lot on my plate. What with many children, a full-time job, a homestead, and loads of other responsibilities. I'm here to bring you inspiration, positivity, and community around having a busy life and still wanting to chase that author dream, even if you have to take a casual approach. For more information about the podcast, me, or my books, head to thecasualauthor.com. Let's get started. Hey there, it's Dan Kenner with episode number 134 of the podcast. Today is Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024, as I record this. And here I'm excited to talk to Testa about winning social media through escapism. We talk about her love of escapism and why that's an important part of her writing and how that plays into her social media success. She's been able to build quite a platform on social media to reach and connect with readers. So as you know, social media is not my forte. It never has been, but she has been able to put together a strategy and work with the community in a very effective way, and part of that is because of her love and effectiveness in escapism through her books. So I think you want to stick around for that conversation. You're going to enjoy it very much. So this last week has been awesome, a tiny bit overwhelming. One thing I did not mention in my last podcast was that I was going through a job transition, like a full-time job transition. So unexpectedly during my paternity leave, there was a company that reached out about, an awesome opportunity that I didn't want to pass up. So about in the past 6 weeks, less than 6 weeks, when we had our seventh baby, our cow had her calf, and we started milking her twice a day. We've got all this milk we're dealing with. And then, 2 weeks after all of that, I'm starting a new job. So it's just a little bit wild. I know you can't always plan when those life changes happen, but I generally don't prefer to have them all happen at once. But you know what? We can't, you just deal with it. So that being said, momentum has not reduced with my author business. I'll get into some of those updates here in just a minute. But, let's take a step back and talk a little bit about the homestead and the family life. So my kids were pretty sad for me to go back to work after my 4-week paternity leave. It was a glorious time. I love being on paternity leave, and it was admittedly a little bit difficult. I talked about this last week and the week before to get back into work, but I think they're all sliding back into the schedule. We're getting back into homeschooling, and they're feeling, having the schedule being more regular is very good for them. So our kids definitely thrive on having as much regularity as possible. I know it's not always possible, but they do like their schedule. They like things happening the same time during the day. It's just people's behavior and moods are just much better when we do those things. Still, they're like still lamenting that I have to go back to work. My son still asks, "Oh, do you have to go to work tomorrow?" Yeah, I do have to go to work. I get to go to work. I try to tell him, but he just rolls his eyes and tells me I'm crazy. Um, but from a homestead perspective, everything has been pretty regular. I say that, but then when I think back, there's so much going on all the time. In fact, just yesterday, we were doing the Great Chicken Shuffle. So just a little bit of a recap of our chicken journey. We've had egg layers for years and years, and we love having the fresh eggs. But part of having egg layers is you have to get a new flock every couple of years because their egg production drops. They just don't have as many eggs, and their body condition doesn't hold. And so we end up butchering and eating our chickens after a couple of years of egg laying production, and we replace it with a new flock. And so currently, we hatched out a new flock last year. Actually, it was this year, really. And so every year we try to add more chickens to the flock. We have to keep track of which ones are a little bit older so that we can make sure to cycle them out. Essentially, they have their purpose. And so yesterday we had to take them back. They are out in the fields, get them from out in the fields where they're pasturing with the cow and bring them back into their normal pen. So that entails a lot of things. We do the deep litter method for chicken coop because we don't always have time / want to clean it out every week. And so what you can do is you put down layers over the manure that they drop, and you add some like stall dry. It's this substance that absorbs all of the ammonium and bad chemicals in their manure. and it just keeps it fresh inside. And so we just keep adding layers to that every week, and so it keeps it nice and fresh. There's no smell, there's no, but what that does is it creates this pretty deep layer of stuff, of nasty muck and manure and bedding and everything. So we had to clean that out a few times a year. And so we had to clean that out, and it was quite an ordeal. I got probably 25 to 30 wheelbarrow loads out of there, just to get down back to the bottom floor level so we could put in fresh stuff and start again. It's not my favorite day of the year, or, a few days of the year, but you do what you got to do. So we spent the weekend cleaning that out, and then yesterday we shuffled them all. We got all the chickens that were out there, the new flock and the older flock, and we put these little leg bands on their legs. It just tells us which ones are, what batch of chickens, because they do kind of look similar. We've tried to keep them separated for the most part, separated, but they can see each other through, house walls and grates and fences, so they can kind of socialize. Otherwise, the chickens will fight each other. So yeah, we socialized them that way. Moved them all yesterday, and had to make like 3 or 4 trips to get them all, because we just have this dog kennel that we put them in, and we don't squish them too much. So we put them in batches and carry them in a wheelbarrow, because chickens are heavy. I tell you what, if you're doing one by one, that's fine. But we are not carrying 49 chickens one by one. I had to do them in batches because I didn't have time. Our property is really long and skinny. So anyway, that's what we were doing this past week, is moving chickens so that they can be back in their new homes. And then I had to move the meat chickens, because if you know anything about meat chickens, they are disgusting. This is probably not encouraging to people who are considering growing their own meat chickens. They just eat so much more, because think about it this way. You get meat chickens and they grow from barely little tiny chick to full size in 8 weeks. That's so fast compared to the egg layers, which it takes them, I want to say, like 6, 7, 8 months before they're fully grown and starting to lay eggs. So very, very different. Their eating patterns are very different. Meat chickens will eat so much food, and naturally, because they eat and drink so much, they poop over everything. And so every single day, there's thick layers of poop that we have to clean out and replace, or add bedding on top to, cover it up. And they're just really gross. So the soonest we can get them out on pasture, the better, because it's easier, rather than, deep litter method doesn't really work when chickens are functioning so much. So what we have to do is we put them out on pasture in a house, and then we move them physically. All of that manure drops in one place and it fertilizes it all. But over the winter, it's going to soak in and break down into the ground and be really good food for the ground. And so we just physically move them to a fresh part of the ground every single day. And that's the best way to deal with it. At least that's what we found in the past. It's not always easy to move them, because they're fat and chunky, and because they're meat chickens, but we make it work. And so that's what we'll be doing this next week, is getting them out there. We move the other flock back. Chicken shuffling, it's just a reality of homesteading. But other than that, yeah, we've got a handle on the milk for the most part. We're doing some trades with some neighbors. They're providing some things that we need, and like hay bales, and we're providing milk for them they need, and it's working out great. My wife has been enjoying making cheeses. She's made a whole bunch of different kinds of cheeses, and cream. She made sour cream for the first time this last week, and it's incredible. It's the most delicious sour cream I've ever tasted. And we make ice cream and butter and all these things. So it's very cool. It's very strange having homemade products like that, but when you have so much cream to work with, you figure why not? It does taste a lot better, I think. The things that you buy from the store, it has almost like an old rancidy flavor. Not always, but sometimes, or a lot of the time, because it's just been, who knows how long it's been sitting on the shelf compared to fresh made stuff. Um, there's no preservatives in them, obviously, because we make them from home. So they do go bad, quote unquote, a little bit faster in some cases. So we have to freeze a lot of things. Just go through things a little bit faster, but it doesn't matter, because we can just make more when we run out. Um, so far, really enjoying the cow. Hopefully, we continue to enjoy it. We're not as exhausted with all, because I think we've gotten to a rhythm. But yeah, so that's it on the homesteading. So in terms of author news, the ARC copies of Dragon Blood have gone out this week. So I sent it to everybody who signed up for ARC copies. If you're still interested, you can still sign up for it. So there's a link if you go to any of my social media pages. Author is he just author Dan Kenner, I believe, on Instagram, and I can't think of it. TikTok. You click there, there's a sign up page for the arc of Dragon Blooded. Anyway, it's going to be published September 24th on all major retailers. I do intend on putting it up early on my direct sell website. So if you're interested in getting an early access copy to that, I will be putting up probably about a week and a half to 2 weeks early and selling it there, both in print, signed copies, as well as digital copies. So I may put a little price incentive on that as well. We'll see. But in any case, it's strange. It's good and strange to be in the final stages of putting a book together because I feel like I've been writing this book for so long. It's been so long since I published a book, but it hasn't. It was last year, 3 books, the Kids of Cyber City. I think those ones feel a little different though because those were co-written and published through a publisher. So it's been a while since I've done the actual formatting, editing, putting together of the final pages, uploading them into KDP and Book Vault and all these places. So it's great. It feels wonderful to be back at this point, and it reminds me how much I love finishing a book. Um, I don't love the marketing aspects of it, but I'm training myself to get used to it and be more okay with talking about the book. Still, that's coming out September 24th on major retailers. Or if you're listening to this and you want to get early access, then I'll have that up either next week or the week after that, which would be early for you to grab that if you're interested. So, what does that mean for the writing? So, I'm going to continue writing Dwarf Blooded. It's now September, so I'm going to let my short story for Writers of the Future sit for just a couple more weeks before I get back into editing it. And that needs to be submitted by the end of this month. I do intend on taking all of these short stories and packaging them up into kind of like a conglomeration, a Dan Kenner short story collection, and probably just do 4, because that'll end up about 65 to 70,000 words with these short stories. So that's the intent. I just looking forward to doing that. And then, yeah, Dwarf Blooded is still plugging along. I think I've made it to about 65,000 words roughly. There is so much more of the story to write, I think, but keep in mind that I'm a pantser, so I don't know exactly how much is left. Still really enjoying the process though. So that is where I stand on updates for the author business. So, as you know, I do have a Patreon for this podcast, Dan Kenner, excuse me, patreon.com/ the casual author. If you want to head there, the Q&A for this month will be going out this Friday. Hopefully, if I can get everything put together, recorded, and edited, then you'll see that. It's just for a couple dollars a month if you're interested. It's just a subscription service. I hope to provide more content in the future. Right now, I'm still just trying to figure everything out. But if you love the show and want to support it, then head to Patreon, and I would love your support. But I believe that's everything for today, so we can shift over to the interview portion of the podcast. Hey, Nicole, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing very well. I'm really excited to learn about Testa, your pen name, and what are the ins and outs of your writing process and everything. Before we get into the fun questions, how long have you been writing and publishing?
So I have been writing and publishing for about 3 years. So I started getting published in anthologies 3 years ago in 2021. That's when I first got published. And then I started independently publishing my own books in 2022. So technically, I've been a published author for almost 2 years now.
Nice, very cool. So let's talk about that journey a little bit. What led you to writing for anthologies? I've never done that before.
It actually was a really great start. I've been writing stories my whole entire life, and I always knew I wanted to get published, but I never knew the route to doing that. So I was sending a lot of queries out to different agents and getting nothing back. And I had one agent write me back, kind of like giving me some tips that, if I wanted to get published, to kind of put myself out there more on social media and see, so people knew who I was. So I started kind of uh like searching on Instagram for like author stuff, author communities. I had no idea what I was doing, and I stumbled upon this it was called A Write a Christmas, hosted by an author. I forgot her name, and it was like a loop to kind of get you to know other authors. And so through that, I kind of connected with certain authors, and from there joined a few Facebook groups off of what was it, Instagram. And in one of the Facebook groups, there was an author from England named Alice Ivinia, who was looking for authors for this charity anthology she was putting together. And I had messaged her and I told her, I'm not published, but I have, some short stories that are related to water creatures. Like, could I be a part of it? And she took a chance on me, which I'll forever be grateful for, even though she had no idea who I was and I was not, published or anything. But through that journey, being part of the Enchanted anthologies, because we did more books after that, I kind of got to know a lot of authors from around the world and kind of talking with them. There was another author in the group that I became good friends with. She's from Canada. Her name is Jennifer Crump. And she was kind of going through the self publishing process at the time, publishing her own book. This is around like 2020. So I kind of picked her brain and, talked with other authors on what they were doing. And then from there, kind of put everything in place to kind of do it myself about 2 years later.
Very cool. What a great story. I've heard people having really good experiences of writing in anthologies or submitting for anthologies, and I've written short stories, but I've never submitted them anywhere. Well, that's
You
not true.
should. I mean, anthologies, like, you're not going to make any money from them, first off. Some are charity, some are paying, but with the paying anthologies, the combined total amount that you sell gets split among the authors. So you
Right.
don't make a lot of money from it. Basically, what I would recommend for anybody if they want to do anthologies is it's pretty much for exposure because you're paired with other authors. So your work is seen among other authors. So whatever their fan base
Hmm.
is, if those people are reading the story that's in that book, they're gonna read yours too. And then they might like it and be like, oh, let me check out this author. So it's a great way to like get exposure and get yourself on a wider platform to other audiences and for people to know who you are. And that's kind of what I did when I worked with the Enchanted anthologies and also the What's in a Name anthologies. They were charity anthologies, but the exposure, because you're working with other authors and these authors were known at the time, I wasn't. So I kind of got to be exposed to their readers.
That's an interesting thought. I hadn't considered that, but it does make sense. As an
Mm-hmm.
example, maybe you have a short story that happens to be next to someone like Brandon Sanderson, or I can't even think of why can't I think of anybody's names right now. But some of these other authors who, yeah, have an audience in their own, then yeah, I can see how they can help you bring an audience over to you. So what did you do with that? Once you had your anthologies, were you able to collect, I say collect, I don't mean that in a negative way, but collect kind of like a fan base from these anthologies for your own author business? And how did you go about doing that?
So kind of what we did was we were sharing, so we were like sharing on different platforms. So kind of what I did was I was connecting with other authors and kind of participating in follow trains and follow loops to kind of like expose myself to other readers. I don't really recommend doing follow trains and follow loops because a lot of times people will follow you just because they want you to follow back. And there's been this issue of, people that unfollow you, but you don't realize you're still following them afterwards. So it kind of like, in a way, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It'll get people exposed to your books, but at the same time, it's not always a genuine platform. So I recommend people trying to grow organically as opposed to jumping into those follow trains. But they're a great way to start out to kind of connect yourself with other people. I made a lot of great connections and great author friends through doing it. But a lot of times, like, now the biggest thing is pretty much posting on TikTok and also posting in Instagram reels because that's going to give you the most organic exposure and show your stuff to people that aren't always following you to try to
Hmm.
bring more people in.
So, I mean, that's an excellent point. And I recall when I first got on Instagram, all the follow trains and the follow for follow thing. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the challenges around that. Totally understand that. My question for you is because you built quite the community on Instagram. I mean, I know follower count doesn't always necessarily mean anything, but I mean, your Instagram profile is doing very well. So, what have you done to try to create a community around what you're working on?
Okay, so what I've been doing with Instagram, it's been kind of, so like I said, I participated in follow trains, but at the same time, it's kind of been like a double-edged sword because I don't do follow trains anymore. So I've been losing followers, which are the people who were following me just to follow. So now I'm kind of working on um, building organically to try and increase. And trust me, I'm open and honest about this to everybody. Is probably one of the most frustrating experiences ever. But I would say how I've developed a community is through like the people that I've worked with in the different anthologies. A lot of the friends that I met through, these follow trains, and then also, just constantly posting myself on Instagram and also commenting on other people's books, their posts, supporting them. It's kind of how I built a community. And I'm very grateful for all the people who have followed me and are kind of following me on this journey to being a published author. And I really do appreciate it. And a lot of times it's been a lot through the reels. But yeah, I'm still waiting for that viral video. I'm like, please, can I get a viral video to change my life? Like, please. It's just like,
Yeah.
trust me, I'm just like, and then the ups and downs, because it's like you think a video is like so good and then you post and it flops and you're like, oh my God, you're gonna be kidding me. Like seriously, all the work I put through
Hmm.
that. But it's definitely I definitely, my heart goes out to anybody. It's doing this because it really is a frustrating experience. And it's about knowing like how things work and what's going to drive people's attention. The biggest thing is you got to try to get a hook to like hook them within the first 2 seconds, and then try to make them feel something. It's like my that's been my biggest thing is like, why should people care about me? Why should people care about my page? What can I offer to you that'll make you want to follow me? That's been kind of the biggest thing that I've been struggling with. Is like, why should people care about my page? There's like thousands of pages on there, thousands of authors. Like, why follow me? So that's kind of been the biggest thing I've been trying to look into and kind of like rebrand to just, be me and try to, put myself out there in my books.
So you said a lot in there, which it's amazing stuff, and I think it's kind of the antithesis of how to get yourself onto social media, even without being able to guarantee success there, because social media
Mm-hmm.
algorithms are changing every hour, I swear. Like
Yeah.
you can't plan for anything. It's just going to keep changing.
Yes.
So
Yes.
coming from someone who frantically got on social media after publishing my first book, because I was like, oops, I published a book and now I don't know what to do with it, right? Um, and then, I tried to get social media rolling, did okay for a while, and then just got burned out, like so burned out from social media. What recommendations do you have for someone who feels lost getting into social media? Where can they get started? Or maybe they're burned out and they don't know where to keep going with it.
Okay, so definitely like this was something that, I was grateful I was already on Instagram and I had the platform beforehand because I just used Instagram as like regular stuff before I switched it over into being an author. But definitely the number one thing is like you can write a book, but it doesn't mean anything unless you know how to market it. It's like they
Hmm.
didn't tell you this in the author 101 handbook. It's like, oh, I write a book, I publish it. Yay. They didn't tell you like, oh, you're gonna have to go through formatting, you're gonna have to go through editing, you're gonna have to go through a million revisions. It's gonna make you want to like bang your head against the wall. And then you're going to have to market the book because no one's going to buy your book if they don't know it exists, especially since you
Hmm.
don't have a publisher doing it for it. You're like a one man band over here. So definitely like one thing you have to do is if you know you're writing a book, start promoting the book. Like I don't care if the book is not published yet, just start promoting it. Even if it's an idea, start promoting it. Like start making videos on it. They could be something simple as you just talking about the book. Like just start promoting it out there so it can start generating a buzz and generating a following. And the thing is too, it's like, yes, we feel this immense pressure as authors that this is what we have to do to market our books, but at the same time it should be fun. Like this is your social media platform, like you need to be having fun with it because authenticity means a lot and people are going to buy from people that they like. And that's basically what it is. If they feel a connection with you, they're going to buy your stuff because they want to support you. So definitely it should be fun. So if anyone's feeling burnt out, then that means you just need to take a break and kind of just do something for you. At the end of the day, like really, I know a lot of times like you could post like 4 times a week. Me, I choose to post like every single day. So I post once a day on Instagram, once a day on TikTok. And that's what I do for now because honestly, that's all I have time for. Like I work full time, and then I'm trying to get these books out and it's a lot. It really is. And then having to market it as well and, create these reels and come up with these ideas. It's really hard. And also kind of like look toward what your other fellow author friends are doing. Like, look, if
Hmm.
you write in like the mystery category or the fantasy category, look like Google, not Google, but search in the search engines on TikTok and Instagram, like the hashtags for like mystery books or fantasy books, and it'll come up videos and look at the most popular ones and see what they're doing, and maybe you can tailor that toward your book in a way. That's kind of what I've done is I've looked toward other authors that I admire and respect and see what they're doing. And I'm like, oh, how can I take what they're doing and kind of like turn it to my book? Is kind of the way to do it. But at the end of the day, like social media is supposed to be fun and you should be having fun with it. And if you're not having fun with it, that's going to show. And people, like I said, that it's about authenticity. People buy from who they like, and you need to establish a connection with your reader to make them care about you and your book.
Yeah, okay. Once again, filled with amazing advice. I think it's an interesting point to say social media is supposed to be fun. Because it definitely got to a point where I was like, this is not fun.
I've been
But it was
feeling
on
that way
me.
too. I'm like, what's my point of it if like, creating all these videos, if I get like 500 views, I'm like, oh my gosh. But the thing is, like, when you think about it, and somebody actually brought this to my attention the other day, like, if your book gets like 500 views, that's 500 people that saw your book. If you get
That's
a
fair.
thousand views, that's 1,000 people that saw your book. So even though you might not have the 100 million views that we would love, still like people saw your book. So it's not like nobody saw it. They saw it. So eventually that might go to somebody who will want to buy a book of yours. So that's still good in a way, even though it doesn't look like it compared to like all these other people that they just press the button and it's like ding, 10,000 views. Let me post another video, 10,000 views. It's just like it can be frustrating, but at the same time, you have to look at the little successes to get yourself through. Like 500 views is still 500 views. Even 100 views is 100 views. 100 people
Yeah.
saw your book. That I mean, just like try to take that like negative and turn it into a positive, and then just kind of build from there. And the thing is, like being an author that I've learned, even though I haven't been in the game that long, being an author is really a marathon. It's not a sprint. You can't go into it and
Mm,
expect like
yeah.
immediate results and immediate gratification. You're going to put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this. And if you really want it, you're going to keep going.
So yeah, I agree. Definitely very important points to make there because social media, I think for me, I prefer really results based things. So, I work in operations. I'm a full-time operations worker. So generally when I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing things, I can expect a certain number of results from it because I'm
Mm-hmm.
putting in an action that I know what the results will be. With social media, you don't know what the results will be, right? So a lot of
No,
it is
no.
trusting, a lot of it is just luck, a lot of it is just, putting hard work into it. So I think for me, so this question is tricky to answer because I remember putting a lot of time into some videos. It's amazing how long it can take to develop a 30-second like book trailer or a
Mm-hmm.
15-second teaser about something. I've heard of some people taking upwards of 3 hours to put together a less than a minute TikTok video, and then it gets like 100 views, right? Which, like you said, that's 100 people, right? Where's the balance in time for creation to view count that makes it worth it? Like how long is it worth it spending on making a video for social media in your mind?
Well, I mean, I think it all depends on how much time you're depending on putting in. So like
That's
what
fair.
I do is I tend to batch film a lot of content, and honestly like you can do so pretty much like you could batch film a bunch of videos that could be as simple as you just holding your book and like turning it and then saving it to your drafts, and later on when you get time like editing it. So something like, would you read a book that has, I don't know, I'm just going to use my book for an example, like Egyptian mythology, sorcery, forbidden romance, blah blah blah, and then like you turn the book and show the cover. It could be something as simple as that. So it all depends on how much time you're willing to put into it. Like you could just take a video of you like with your book, or if you want to do something that's more like skit based, you could do that. It depends on how much time you're willing to put in. I haven't really done book trailers for my books. I definitely need to do that. And I need to figure out how to do that. I know there's some people that'll do book trailers for you, but like I said, I think it all depends on how much time you're willing to put into it because it's about balance. So if you feel like you want to create those long form videos, you could do that. And it also depends too on what platform you're working towards. Because I know TikTok tends to prefer like the longer videos, whereas Instagram, I've noticed you get more views on more shorter form content. So like a 5 to 8 second video usually will perform better on Instagram.
Interesting. That's an interesting point. I hadn't known that before. So, because back when I was on TikTok, a lot of it was, I say that like I'm not on there anymore. I still am a little bit, just not very religiously. A lot of it was focused on, like the 7 second sweet spot video. So it sounds like
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
moving
yeah.
more towards long form content, which is interesting. Um, I don't frequent that app very much anymore these days. So, how do you know what feels right? Do you just suggest trying a bunch of different things and seeing if they feel right to you? Or would you recommend just, I don't want to say imitating because that's not quite the right word, um, learning from existing authors and doing it if it looks like it's working for them?
I mean, the thing is, at the end of the day, you need to know your own platform. So you have to, it's all about trial and error. Like, yes, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, as they say, but at the end of the day, you have to know what works for you. So, like, you can piggyback off ideas of other authors and, put it into your content. But the nice part is now both TikTok and Instagram have um, analytics. So you can click on a video and they will show you all the analytics of what happened with your video. Like how long did people watch through it before they scrolled away. So I think from there you can kind of it'll take some time, but obviously like studying the analytics of your videos and then from there being like, okay, well, this type of video has performed the best based on view count, like count, comment count. And then from there, maybe doing more stuff, more videos tailored in that realm.
Yeah, okay. So that's an interesting point. I haven't spent a significant amount of time in the analytics portion of the app, only, for time reasons. I know I need to do that. But
I
yeah,
mean,
there's
it'll
just
show you on every single video. So, like, if you look at your video and you pull up one video, I think it's like, I can't remember. It'll either say like analytics, press the button on the video, or it'll be like 3 dots and it'll like come up, like the watch time, like how long they did, like where it was, stuff like that. It's right on the video. So, if you're like looking at your video, you could just press it and see.
yeah, well, I'll spend a little more time doing that. So I know there's a lot of people that have found success in, drawing on this idea of escapism to draw an audience in, to for lack of a better term, flaunt and escape from the stresses of real life. And I know you indicated this is one of the major reasons you write as well, right? Is to provide
Mm-hmm.
that escape for people. So why is that such an important part of writing for you?
So I think like for me, I like giving people an escape from reality because especially now I feel like life is really hard for everybody and we're really
Hmm.
like struggling and I feel like a lot of times when I'm sitting down on my laptop and I'm writing, I kind of feel like I get taken away from what's going on in my personal life and because I get lost in telling a story and I wanted people
Mm.
to feel that same way. I also really like to in majority of my books, I really do like to portray like hope because, I feel like if people can see my characters going through similar situations that they might be experiencing and seeing how my character goes through it and perseveres and gets through it, then maybe that will inspire them to not give up and keep doing what they're doing.
No, I love that. I think that's a really interesting point to make. How do you know how to connect with the reader? Do you pre-plan all of your books? Are you a pretty heavy plotter, or is it just right as you go?
I would say a lot of times it's really been right as I go, but lately I have been like plotting stuff because unfortunately due to me working full time and working a lot, the time I have to write is always at nighttime and I hate writing at nighttime because I'm so tired from working all day and then going to the gym afterwards. So it's like when I sit down, I only have like a certain amount of time before I'm going to like fall asleep. So I kind of need to know like, all right, tonight we're going to write about this and then kind of go from there. So but a lot of times like a lot of my stories are just stuff I've dreamed up in my head or kind of taking experiences that I've seen myself go through or other people go through and not really liking the outcome. So putting something similar into a story and getting the outcome that I liked, or even like kind of, trying to give like lessons because I think like society has really, you know, um, kind of distorted our perception of how we think about certain things and kind of taking that stuff and showing them like you are on your own path, you're on your own journey, and don't compare your chapter 1 to someone's chapter 30. You're eventually going to get there when the time is right, and don't let anybody tell you that you can't do something if you believe that you can.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very interesting perspective to have on it. I'm the same way. I try to write in the morning though, with my full-time job because they tend to be a
I
little
love
bit more
writing in the
fresh in the
morning.
morning. I like writing in the morning as well. But you have to admit, when you do write at night, sometimes going through the editing process is quite entertaining as you read some sentences and you're like, what was I even saying? Trying to just like
I
reading
know. I have
code.
to say, I say all the time, nighttime writing me and daytime writing me are two completely different people. Like, when I read this, I'm like, what are you trying to say here? Like, what were you
Yep.
talking about? It's just like, it's crazy. I'm like, it's like two different people writing. I'm like,
hmm
I like daytime writing me better than nighttime writing me, but sometimes it works at night, but it's just crazy.
Well, I want to point out two things related to what you just indicated because sometimes the reason this podcast is called The Casual Author is because by nature of my situation, my responsibilities as an adult, I don't get to write full time, and that's okay for now. I'm a
Hmm.
casual author because that's all I have time for is being casual. However, you pointed out that your nighttime self and your morning self are different, but the fact of the matter is you're still writing, knowing that you can come back and edit it later. So I think there's a lot of people that are hesitant to take little bits of time because maybe they're worried, well, I'm not in my best set of mindset. Maybe I'm not my best self right now, so I should wait to write until the moment is perfect. But the fact of the matter is that you might not have perfect moments. You just have moments that you can use to write. So, does it ever bother you that your nighttime self isn't maybe as on point as your morning self, or do you just figure you'll edit it out later?
So I think one thing I would have to say is one thing I've learned throughout my life is there's never going to be that perfect moment.
Yeah.
There's never going to be that time where you're actually going to be ready to do something. You need to just go for it and not let fear hold you back. So if there's like one night where I'm super exhausted and I can't write, I that rarely ever happens. But usually I'm just like sometimes it's like if I write a paragraph or I write a sentence, like it's a good night. So it's kind of like you just have to go for it and just it depends on how bad you want it. Like if you want it bad enough, you're gonna figure it out. So that's kind of what I have to do. I hate writing at nighttime, but we do it and we get it done anyway. And some nights we have good nights and we can write, a chapter. Other nights we have not so good nights and we write a sentence and that's about good enough. So you kind of have to, at the end of the day, be kind to yourself and know that maybe your life situation is not how you want it to be, but it's not going to be that way forever. So you just got to weather the storm for now till you get to an outcome that will be more desirable later on.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's an amazing perspective to have on the whole writing process, particularly with being busy and having all of these
Hmm.
things going on. But I'm curious to know, how do you with how busy you are, I understand that to some degree. How do you keep the element of imagination and escapism present in your mind when your mind is most likely consumed with job function
Hmm.
and family function and whatever, finances? How do you keep the escapism and imagination alive despite all those things?
It's hard because I do suffer from writer's block a lot. And a lot of times, like, I do have not the best mental health days either. So, I do suffer from imposter syndrome. Sometimes I do think like my writing is not good, that I'm never going to make as an author. So I do have those doubts there. But I would say, like, you kind of have to try to like get inspiration from like wherever you go. So sometimes like listening to like music in the car as you're driving or like when I'm in the gym or I'm listening to music, like sometimes I'll just kind of be like thinking about things like when I'm on like the treadmill or the stairmaster and kind of like letting my mind drift to different places. Like inspiration through, watching TV or even, other people on social media, kind of like trying to like pull stuff there too. And then also there are some like um there's stuff online where it's like they have these like different like generators where it could be like a fantasy generator or like a sentence starter generator. And sometimes those
Hmm.
are good when you're suffering from writer's block. They'll kind of like maybe give you like an idea to kind of jumpstart the process. Sometimes I do those when I need like a jump start into my creative process. And then from there you kind of like it gives you something to kind of think about and you kind of think and think and think. And then from there your ideas kind of start flowing.
That's an interesting point. I hadn't considered those generators. I'd never used any of them before, but I have heard of them. So kind of in those instances where you feel a little lost, you feel a little stuck to get into it. Yeah, I can see how those would be very, very helpful. So, do you spend the tricky thing about being an author is, oftentimes when you have a lot going on, you almost have to trade off your creative writing time with your creative consumption time through like
Mm-hmm.
reading, watching TV, those types of things. So, do you find that you try to find as much time to consume stories? Read and write books? Is that something you like to do, or is that not possible with your schedule?
To be honest, when I grew up, I loved reading. I always was reading. Unfortunately, now that I'm like working full time and I'm writing my own books, I really don't have time to
Hmm.
read as much as I would love to. I buy books a lot because, I like to support other indie authors and I like to support the authors. So I have like a whole like stack of books that I need to read. But a lot of times like I'll just kind of like open the books and like maybe read a chapter or like skim through them. Um, but I really would love to read more. There's just never any time. And it's hard. And then it's like, when I have my free time, it's like I want to work on my own books. So it's just, it gets frustrating sometimes, but I'll always be buying books because I like to support the other authors and the indie authors. And I know how much that support means to authors. So I do that. And I say, I'll get to reading that book at some point.
Which maybe you will. I mean,
Hmm.
when you're a full-time author someday, right? But yeah, I get that. I'm convinced that book buying and collecting is a different hobby from reading. Uh,
Hmm.
because a lot of people just buy books because they're beautiful. I have to admit, I have some books on my shelf that I just bought because they were beautiful. Like, oh, that is a really nice looking book. I don't know if I'll ever read it, but it's beautiful and it's on my shelf, so I'm happy with
Yeah.
it. So kind of funny how that works. But so yeah, in terms of, you're writing a book and escapism, what do you like to put into your stories to make them great mechanisms for escape?
So I do a lot of fantasy books because I love magic. I've always loved magic. I've
Mm.
always loved like alternate realms. So I do a lot of that in my books. I'm working on my Sephora series, which combines Egyptian mythology and sorcery, and book one is going to be released in December. So I kind of have all those elements of like mystery and magic with a little romance and Egyptian mythology, sorcery all combine into that. So I guess that would fit like the escapism.
Yeah, very cool. I'm a big fan of magic as well. I struggle to write stories that don't have it because for some reason I find just this idea of magic fascinating, the different
I love
rules and
magic.
consequences and everything.
I
So,
know.
let's talk a little bit about, you've read, how many books have you published up to this point? I didn't get to ask.
So I've published two, and then my third book is coming out in December.
December. Perfect. Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about the magic in your books, right? And how
Mhm.
they lend to this idea of escapism. What is your favorite part of this magic system or elements in one of the books that you've written?
So I really love sorcery, probably because I've always wanted to be like a sorceress. So in the Sephora series, we've done a different magical element. So we don't use any wands or nothing like that. So pretty much how the magic system works is like the spells are generated within the person's core soul
Mhm.
and then kind of extends outward through the hands and the spell comes in, since it's Egyptian mythology, the spell comes releases from the hands in the forms of different hieroglyphics. So the different
Oh,
hieroglyphics
okay.
attain to the different spells.
Very cool. So did you have to study those hieroglyphics then, or is that just something that you've learned over the years and you're just familiar with
So
them?
it kind of like the magic system I've created, but with this book, I would say with any book, there is a fair amount of research that goes into it, and definitely with Egyptian mythology to try to make it as authentic and realistic as possible. Um, it does take a lot of research. So I did do a lot of research into like Egyptian hieroglyphics and stuff like that. Some of the hieroglyphics I kind of created on my own, but we did take a lot of, different hieroglyphics and use them as part of the spells.
Well, I mean, it's fiction, so you're at liberty to do that, right? Unless this is a
Yes.
historical fiction. I mean, I don't know.
No, it's
It's
fantasy.
fantasy, definitely very
It's
fantasy.
fantasy.
That's
Yeah,
where
it's
I like
very
to be. I
fantasy.
get
Like
that.
we incorporated some of like Egyptian mythology and some of like ancient Egyptian life into it. But at the end of the day, I kind of always say like this is a fantasy book and I've taken some of the realistic perspectives, but then I've also put a twist on them because it's my own realm and my books. So
Yeah. But yeah, very cool. I can get so nerdy about magic systems and just like thinking about, well, what does that mean? What is the effect on this world now that this magic system exists? So are you, this is just completely random question for this four books. That's the one that's coming out in December, right?
yes,
Um,
yeah.
are you going to be putting the visual images of the hieroglyphics in the text as you're writing it? Or is there going to be like Egyptian motifs as part of the formatting? Just curious to know what visually those hieroglyphics will might affect what the book looks like.
So definitely what we're trying to do is with me, I'm big on aesthetics. So for me, because like this is my books and I put pride in my work, I like to put all the bells and whistles. So I'm going to be working with the formatter probably around November for
Nice.
us to do something. I know we're going to have like illustrations. So my sister is actually a very good artist. She actually
Nice.
drew illustrations that we're going to put into the book for each chapter. And as far as like hieroglyphics, I'm gonna see if I can incorporate something if it's possible. We're gonna see. I know I am gonna have like a little bit of back matter in the back, kind of explaining the Egyptian gods and a few other things. Because one thing I noticed when I had people beta reading my stories is people really aren't as familiar with Egyptian mythology as they are Greek mythology, which I found that shocking. So we have to do a lot of clarification as well, even though it is a fantasy book, just making sure people don't get lost because there is a lot of Egyptian gods, a lot of spells. So we're going to try to put some back matter in there to clarify things a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an excellent place to put it. I personally don't know a lot about Egyptian mythology.
Mm-hmm.
The only real experience I've had, I say real like it means anything. The the only real experience is with the Rick Riordan Kane Chronicles. The
Yes.
Sabian, I can't even remember what his.
He's the one that actually inspired me
Oh,
to
cool.
put
Very
Egyptian
cool.
mythology in my books because I read the books and I loved it, but I hated the ending. I really
Well,
did
I didn't
not
like
like
the
the
ending
end of
either,
the series.
actually.
I was like it came up short at the end. I was kind of like, I don't really like this. We're gonna need to fix some stuff. And then also I really enjoyed watching when I was younger. It's not too popular, but they used to have this show on the Nickelodeon channel called House of Anubis,
Huh.
which was about these students who were part of this boarding school in England, and it had a lot to do with Egyptian mythology. And they had to go on different little like adventures to solve different mysteries with related to Egyptian mythology. That was another
Hmm.
thing that inspired me to use Egyptian mythology in my books.
Very cool. I mean, that makes total sense. I'm glad to know I'm not the only one that didn't love the ending of that
No,
series,
I didn't like the
but
ending of that series. It came up flat. Like I was like, what? Like no.
felt
It's
like
no.
it felt a little shortchanged. But I
Yeah,
think
it
that's a
felt
great thing.
a little short at the end.
That's my favorite thing about reading and writing. So if I happen to be a pretty heavy pantser, so for me, as I'm writing, I'm literally, like you said, escaping this world because I don't know what I'm going to be writing next. I sit
Hmm.
down at the page and I just let it flow out of my mind. And so I'm literally reading it for the first time as I'm writing it. And sometimes I'm surprised by the twist. Sometimes I'm shocked by what happens. And I want to do that for the readers as well. And so I
Hmm.
think I always tell people my goal is to write books that make it hard for you to sleep at night because you want to just sit up reading. I
Yeah.
love books like that just suck you in and you're just like, I want to keep reading. I want to keep reading. And so I want to write books like that. That's what I like to do.
Hmm.
Sounds like you might f be in a similar spot with what you want to do.
Yeah, definitely.
Very cool. Well, so because I think prior to the recording started, you mentioned you mostly write fantasy. You've written some mystery, it sounds like, and that you hope to write lots of other things. So talk a little bit more about the future of your writing career and what that might look like.
Okay, so with me, I tend to I love fantasy and I'll always write fantasy books, but I always like to challenge myself and try to like try different genres. So I kind of write under different pen names that eventually I'll be using in the future to kind of separate everything, which is why when I created my social media, I didn't really put like ND Testa for my social media. I came up with the idea of the blue-eyed writer. 'Cause I
Hmm.
wanted a little mystery, and also I figured that would be like an umbrella term for like all the different pen names that I write under. So I kind of use that. And like I said, I always try to like step out of the box and try different stuff. And I have different pen names in my mind that eventually I will use in the future for different styles of books. So I do a little mystery. Eventually, I'd like to get into more like romance too. I would like to do children's books in the future as well. So I try to like keep all my bases covered because I want, you know, everyone to feel like they have something that they like to read in my books. So everybody has something for everybody eventually. Like once we get more established and more books out. So if you like family friendly, it's there. If you like spicy, it'll be there. So it's like a one-stop shop kind of thing.
You want to create a whole library for everybody.
Maybe. We'll see.
Maybe, maybe. I would say an ND test library, but that's not going to be your pen name for everybody. So, uh, a Nicole library, right, that everybody can
Yeah.
access. But I love that. I think
Yeah.
that's amazing. So, based on that, where can people find more information about you and your books and your upcoming book coming out in December?
So where you could find more information is I'm on Instagram and TikTok as the Blue Eyed Writer. Also in both my social media platforms. Um, I have a link you can subscribe to my newsletter. I usually do like a bi-weekly newsletter. So like once or twice a month, I'll send out updates. I'm also on YouTube as the Blue Eyed Writer as well. And then the Instagram threads that they have now, the Blue Eyed Writer too. So pretty much if you put in the Blue Eyed Writer, you'll find me.
Nice. I love the consistency. It's so easy to find someone. Not a knock on anybody who doesn't keep it consistent, but definitely makes it easier to find you if
Yeah.
it's all the same. Well, very cool. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
No, I'm honored you had me. I'm happy to be here.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with ND Testa. I really appreciated her insight and positivity around social media because that is not hasn't been my experience, but I think that's partially because of attitude, transparently. I think it's just something to get over. And I do hope to learn a little bit more about it in the future, whether I do go into it all out or just post here and there like I have been. But next week, we'll be talking to Andrew Johnston about leaving traditional publishing and independently publishing his books. So he made the decision. His first debut novel was published through a publisher. He decided, based on a lot of different factors, how indie publishing might fit him better. And so we talk about his experience leaving it, getting rights back and publishing things on your own, all the work that goes into it and decisioning around it. So I think you'll really enjoy that conversation. It provides an interesting perspective for those who are considering a change, whether from traditional to indie or vice versa, from indie to traditional. So you want to stick around for that conversation next week. Thank you again for listening. And if you want to join me on the podcast, just head to thecasualauthor.com. Or if you just want to tell me where you're listening, head to any of my social media pages, tag me, send me an email, Dan at the Casual Author. I'd love to hear where you're listening and what what you like or dislike about the show. Any feedback you have is awesome. So thank you for listening, and I hope to talk to you next week.